we don't wait for communities to become inclusive and welcome people with disabilities. Our very presence in the community makes the community inclusive. And so if you think of it that way, we are, again, I just go to this mutual benefit, employers who are hiring people, businesses who are being visited by people with disabilities, your neighbor, who lives next door, who's supporting their adult child, the kids in the classroom that are going to school with your kids who maybe are receiving special ed services. It's just something that is far more present in our daily lives. And again, the system sort of 75 years ago was sort of built to kind of segregate and protect people from the world in a way that was very caring and dignified and built on a foundation of love. And we are shifting into a perspective of this full inclusion and meaningful interactions with people who are non-disabled and disabled in the community, and how that can benefit everyone, but particularly the people with disabilities. Our clients are living longer and longer, partially because of advances in medicine, right? But I think more than that, people with IDD are living longer because we have invested in these social determinants of health.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hart and Hustle podcast. And I'm sitting across the table from another amazing leader here today, and we're going to learn all about their Hart and Hustle. Today we have Erin Ryan, who is the CEO of Shore Community Services. Erin, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Keenan.
So, Erin, we have to kind of start off on a heartfelt note today. Before we start talking about the business and everything that you guys have accomplished and how you support the community and the amazing lives that you've impacted, how is your heart doing today?
Oh, I'm feeling great today, actually. I just had a moment this morning when I was dropping my kids off to camp. We're on spring break right now, where, my heart just got full watching them walk into the park district building and have each other's back and be there for each other and go off to a new adventure without me. So that filled my heart up this morning, and I've been carrying that with me all day.
Oh my gosh, that's an amazing place for us to get started here today. So, one of the things that I recognize about leaders like yourself is often we're either on this path from the very beginning of how long ago we can remember, or this is an opportunity that kind of popped into our mind and popped into our lives and we had to take advantage of it. So my question for you, when your fifth grade teacher asked you, Erin, what are you going to be when you grow up? Did you say, I'm going to be the CEO of an amazing organization like Shore Community Services, or what did that look like for you?
I said I was going to be the boss.
Okay.
I kid you not. Either that or an astronaut or maybe a ballerina. So, it's an eclectic mix of things. But I did have a sense from early on that I would lead. And so I've sought ways to do that, and I've had some great examples along the way.
What were some of the first examples that you remember? Like, I'm talking the earliest times of you being a leader, of people following you that you can remember.
Well, I was a leader in my family. I'm the oldest of 6 children. So as a leader in my family, just sort of by default, but also at school, one thing that I remember clearly is that I believe it was 4th grade or something. My school didn't have a school newspaper. And so a friend of mine and I decided that we would start a school newspaper. So we got permission from our teacher to use the photocopy machine. We drew comics, we wrote articles, we interviewed teachers. And we photocopied it and distributed it to every classroom. And it was great fun. I think we did 2 or 3 issues before it kind of got shut down. But it was great fun. And it was an early lesson in sort of, organizing people towards a common goal.
And what were some of those like early aha moments where you realized like, hey, we can actually do something bigger than ourselves in 4th grade, right? We can be the voice of the school. Mm-hmm. We can interview teachers. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, I think that very, very early in my childhood, maybe I was 6 months to 3 years old, I lived actually in another country. And I think that very early experience kind of connected me to something bigger than myself. Even as I grew up in my small town, rural Kansas town, later on, I always kind of knew that the world was much bigger and people had much different experiences. They looked different from me. The weather was different. They ate different foods, right? And having that experience kind of kept me connected to the bigger picture from the very beginning. And so that's how I think I've sort of developed my big picture thinking.
Well, I know that you spent a good amount of your career working in, how do I say this, like population health, community-based health systems as a social worker as well, if I'm not correct. So how did you kind of make that decision to go in that direction professionally at such a young age? Was that right after college? Do you have experiences that got you exposed to that similar to the newspaper? Or what was that process like for you?
Yeah, both of my parents worked in healthcare. My father was a physician and my mom was an x-ray tech. So always working in the community, always working on behalf of and for the benefit of others' health. So that was an early example. I decided after college that I did want to work in social services. I thought at the time that I was kind of getting my feet wet. And I found a job as a volunteer coordinator at a local community homeless shelter here in Chicago. And working as a volunteer coordinator gave me great insight into the power of small businesses, faith communities, larger corporations, families coming together to have an impact at the local level. So my job was to match these groups of people or individuals with the service work that we needed done. But I also saw the mutual benefit of this arrangement, right? Volunteers often said that they got as much or even more out of the experience than the people who were receiving services. And so creating those opportunities for people who are in very different circumstances in life to connect together in an authentic way, I learned early on really benefits everyone. And so I just pursued a career from there that would help me keep doing that.
I mean, I feel like it's so amazing helping people navigate the healthcare system, right? I've been in the space now for over 11 years, and I think about how the healthcare literacy is not something that everybody truly understands, right? We don't know what services are in our community, how we access them, and so you guys play an incredibly important role of being that connector, if you will, and giving people the information they need to make the best decisions on how they can guide their own lives.
Absolutely. I think that's why I pursued the educational experience to kind of back up my work experience. So social work and then public health helped me kind of navigate those systems and understand how the systems work better so that I could be that bridge between the ground level folks who are trying to navigate and the system itself. And so I did that for many, many years in direct service. And then along the way began planning programs, measuring outcomes, creating systems of my own. And then, the kind of on the side along the way in nonprofits, you pick up all these other things, fundraising, human resources, and all the business side of things as well.
What was it like engaging with, a nonprofit organization, recognizing that in order for you to be a future leader, you had to round out that skill set of fundraising, being able to kind of create programs, and then having like the templates and the frameworks to actually imprint your mark on these organizations? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I was so fortunate. I spent 15 years of my early career at the same organization. So that organization where I started as volunteer coordinator, I became a night intake worker at the shelter. I went back to school for the social work degree, became a case manager, started working more individually with the people experiencing homelessness. And because it was a small place, it sort of relied on people wearing multiple hats. And so I just had great mentors and leaders along the way who, if I said, hey, I'm interested in grant writing, I want to learn how to write a grant, then they would give me a grant to write, I remember when I became executive director of that organization, and I had a treasurer who for many years on the board who had been balancing the books. And I said, I need to learn this. So can I just learn QuickBooks and learn how to balance the books and do the budget? And he said, be my guest. Yeah. So you kind of have to step up and ask for it sometimes. But if you work in the right place, people will realize that potential in you and they will they'll start feeding you more and more to do.
Do you think that these have been strategic and intentional steps that you've taken that were kind of informing your roadmap of how you were going to become the leader of an amazing organization like Shore Services?
I think so. I am a big picture thinker. I think, that for a brief moment in time, I thought I would go to medical school, and I realized that I had a much bigger picture view of the world and each person's place in it in order to focus on one part of the body or even one individual person and their health. And so finding those connections helps me be curious about the whole 360 degrees of a thing, whether it's an organization or a social issue. Or even just learning a new skill. I kind of want to see it from all sides and then hone in on where my skill set can do the most, have the most impact.
So I want to double click on two things. Number one, you mentioned curiosity there, so I want to put a pin in that for the conversation.
Okay.
The first thing I want to refer back to is you say that you're a big picture thinker, right? How did you develop that mindset of looking at the bigger picture outside of yourself and the whole, how everything comes together? But beyond that, why is that so important for a leader like you in the position who you are today?
Yeah, I think that it probably has something to do, my therapist would probably agree, that it's something to do with early childhood, right? Being from a big family who, my big family was nestled within a big family. My mom's one of 8 children, so big extended family as well. And just always kind of having conversations about the greater good and how, different choices can affect more than just the individual making the choice. It was just something that was kind of rooted in the way that we operated as a family, always kind of putting the whole above the individuals, and kind of that notion that we are stronger together, right? And we're greater than the sum of our parts. So that was just modeled for me very early on. And, I also lived in a small town. I mentioned that, moved to a big city after college, and kind of brought that small town mentality with me, right? So, we are all very interconnected in this world. And the strength of any programs that we are operating to benefit others, it lies in the connections that we make. They're human connections, they're human relationships. And even in a big city, in a huge, knotty problem, that's what makes a good program stand apart from a not so good program, right? Is those human connections and those relationships and those networks that are built on the ground level.
It's incredibly refreshing for me to hear you say that, because it seems like we need that little sound clip, if you will, as a lesson to how we even approach our communities today in the greater swath of all the division and the individualism and the isolation that people see today, especially because of how social media and everything has the ability to kind of pull us apart. Recognizing that everything is connected to the bigger picture is something that I think is so important. So, I have to ask the question, do you ever become frustrated, right, with kind of where it seems like it's so easy for everybody to be standing alone and separated and not unified around key elements that impact our community, that kind of impact everybody like we've been talking about?
Absolutely. I've been, really the most frustrated in my life when we are divided, when we've been trying to create something really good for the community and encountering NIMBYism, not in my backyard, where people, don't walk their walk, that they talk their talk, like we are inclusive and we want everybody here, but just not in my backyard. And so it's really disheartening when that happens. And it's really disheartening when, all the progress that we've made over time that has been hard fought for and hard won starts getting chipped away. And so I find strength in coming together again, in the developmental disability field in particular, and I think in nonprofits in general. We've tended to be kind of siloed and territorial. And that is out the window to me, right? We cannot maintain the safety net of services without really being in lockstep together. And so finding sort of my people wherever I go, whether they're fellow nonprofit leaders or community leaders or anybody who I think, we can mutually benefit each other. I'm out there trying to build those connections. And that's what gets you up in the morning, to keep coming to work, even when the headlines are depressing.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the podcast, we first want to say thank you. And we also just want to give you a little insight of what we're up to at Francis. Some don't even realize that we're working with organizations to help them use AI to create that real human communication experiences, whether that's actually supporting your families, those patients, or the entire community. We're actually creating tech that connects. Check it out, francis.ai.
Yeah, I mean, I want to use this as a segue to kind of talk about curiosity. Right? When we are curious about how we can come together, create solutions to support the whole person, right, of our community, meaning everybody, every opportunity that we have to surround them with services, like you said, we are stronger together. It creates a more unified community around the people who need our support the most. And so when you think about, I would say the idea of curiosity, did you have a curious moment where you discovered the work that Shore Services was doing and then were like, hey, this is going to be an organization that I was going to work for? Or how did you kind of discover the organization? How do we kind of segue into the work that you're doing today?
Sure. So I had spent a lot of time, a couple of decades, working in that intersection of housing and healthcare, homelessness. And I was really looking for a way to leverage that professional experience and my contacts in a more personal way. I have a son, he's 11 years old, who was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and developmental delay, who really inspired me to kind of pivot in this field. So as a parent, I was already gaining an informal education, a crash course education in navigating the very complex world of services for kids with disabilities, including school services, IEPs, planning for the future. My partner and I are thinking all the time about how to set him up for the best possible future. So when I started to look for a shift in career and I started to think about alignment with my personal values and personal experience, I learned about Shore. It's right in my backyard. And I knew immediately it was the right place to bring both my personal and professional experience.
So when you saw the organization, right, and you've got all these skill sets, right, of fundraising and being able to design programs and all of your history in the nonprofit space, what were some of the low-hanging fruit opportunities, I guess, that you saw in your ability with all of your experience to impact the organization favorably?
Yeah, so there's low-hanging fruit or tension, depending on how you look at it, on being the outsider looking in and being the new person, right? So I get a lot of opportunity in this past year that I've been CEO to listen deeply, to really understand the rich history of the organization and the legacy that it brings to this work. It's one of the first organizations in our area to serve folks with intellectual and other developmental disabilities. And so there's a real legacy to protect and build on. And I have a fresh perspective, right? There's lessons maybe from the homeless service world, which is, by the way, also a very complex system of funding and service providers and priorities and politics, et cetera, and kind of bring some of that fresh perspective and new insights into the work and ask some questions maybe that, because of the longevity of the organization, hadn't been asked in a while. Why do we do this the way we do it? Why does it have to be this way? Does it have to be this way? And because I'm also a big picture thinker, I think that I keyed in very early on to what's coming down the road. There's a lot of change coming in this work with developmental disabilities that are coming from the federal level, at the state levels, reshifting of priorities. We are really moving away from a system of protecting our loved ones, to a system that really champions individual choice and dignity and risk for people to make choices about their lives. And that's a huge shift. And I just get really excited about sort of being in on this moment in time shift, because I can, I hope, kind of merge and come alongside the work that has been done to build towards this future that we're looking towards. So it's a very exciting, this is exactly, as you could tell, what I get excited about is not a stagnant system, but a system sort of on the precipice of change. And how can I help guide and usher that in?
Yeah, how can you be a catalyst for the change that we need to see, right, to create services and opportunities to support people how they need to be met? So I want to talk about the concept of risk really quick. So I was recently listening to a podcast. There's a guy out there, his name is Jason Fried. He's the CEO of a company called 37 Signals. They built a company or a platform called Basecamp, which is very similar to Slack. It's like a business communication tool, right?
Yeah.
And Jason was saying, in times of uncertainty, our CEOs and our leaders have to be incredibly skilled at tactfully injecting risk into our organizations. And he said, now what does that mean? Now I'm not telling you to change the entire business model and, throw everything by the wayside, but you have to feel comfortable in challenging people to do things differently because maybe we've gotten stagnant and comfortable in how we've always done things. So how do you think about your role as being a catalyst for injecting risk, thinking about problems differently? How do we attack different challenges and kind of how that's impacted your ability to kind of push the organization forward?
Yeah, so I personally am very comfortable with ambiguity. And I think that sometimes backfires on me in a leadership role because people really want, some clear guidance or clear perspective from their leader. And so it does kind of backfire sometimes. But I do try to, just leave space for the unknown and to accept that we won't always have 100% of the information, right? In fact, we almost never do. And, I really learned this from my clients over the years, all the people that I've worked with individually to help, find employment, find housing, become meet their individual goals. Even in the longest standing relationships, you rarely have 100% of the information. And so you have to be able to make decisions to move forward without 100% of the information. You need enough information to make a good decision. And you need to be okay with saying that didn't work. Let's do something else. And I try to set up every big change with that is we're going to try this. And if it doesn't work, we will try something else. And, again, working with people in a social service space just teaches you deeply at the core that nothing is undoable. And there's a lot of different roads to choose, and we can try a different one if this one doesn't work. And so that's the beauty of it, is that it's trial and error. It's more an art than a science, both, on an individual level and an organizational level. So I try to kind of model that. At the same time, we are holding ourselves accountable to the systems that we've put in place. We're putting in some robust measurement of those systems, because I'm not going to abandon something and try something new if I don't have data, right? So it's both and I think really embracing that as a leader is really important.
When you think about recognizing that adaptability is a key strength, right, that you have to lean into, and you said something that was really important there, which is like, I'm not going to make these decisions without having the data. One of my favorite phrases that I share with my team is the more ways we measure, the more ways we win. So when you came into the organization, did you find that your data strategy was as solid as it could be? Or did you start really implementing different tools to help you guys gather the information to be able to communicate the data and the impact that you guys are making?
Yeah, it's a work in progress. It's definitely, there is data. Whether or not the right people are seeing the data is important, because I talked earlier about siloing as organizations, but internally in an organization, we tend to silo too. So finance might have data that the program team isn't seeing. And that would be really useful to know how our budget is performing, or we might have program statistics that our fundraising department isn't seeing. And so that cross collaboration is so important to make sure that everyone has the right information to make decisions. Did I lose you? Are you here?
No, I'm
Okay.
still here.
Okay, good.
We're still good. This is the beauty of the edit, so no stress. That was a great answer, by the way. So the next thing I want to talk about is kind of your personal mindset. When you recognize that the landscape of our communities, our government, and everything seems to be a little uncertain, how do you cast a vision, right, for success to get other people to buy into the impact and the work that you guys are doing daily and the positive impact that you guys are making on the community? Is that either tough for you to cast that vision in the face of uncertainty?
It absolutely is. And I think that, again, in the developmental disability field, we have really relied over time in our 75-year history, not just of SHORE, but of the field, as a whole. We've really relied on those personal connections. Family members have, somebody has a son or daughter or a brother or sister or a member of their family that is impacted by intellectual and developmental disability, and therefore they care about the issue. So in the face of the uncertainty that we're facing now with funding and competition for resources, it's in our interest to make developmental disabilities something that everybody cares about. You don't have to have a personal connection to the work to recognize how important it is to include people, how beneficial that is for everyone to have meaningful experiences with folks who have all different abilities. And so I think our work ahead is to bring the issue, quite literally, the issue of folks who have marginalized voices or are often forgotten about, bringing their voices to the forefront, but then also ensuring that the broader community just understands and recognizes the value that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities bring into every space.
I mean, I think a huge part of this is we have to be incredibly aware that, individuals with disabilities are a huge part of our community fabric. I mean, I talked about some statistics, right, from some of the work that me and my team do. It's like 1 in 56 children in 2018 were being diagnosed with autism. That number is 1 in 36 as of 2024. And so when you think about and you look around your community, there are families who are impacted in this space. And so it's not like this is something that is happening every once in a while, but this is somebody who a family member who a colleague, a friend who has a family member who is impacted. And that doesn't mean that that's a negative thing, but we should be aware that this is a part of our community fabric. And I think ignoring that isn't a healthy way to approach how our communities are changing.
Absolutely. I think it's a great intro into this idea of community care, and who is part of a care plan, and who's invested in the lives of people with disabilities. We have 30,000 people in Illinois that are supported by our IDD system of services. But we estimate that there are many, many more people who are sort of not registering yet on the radar of the state system because people are living at home longer. They're supported by their families of origin longer. They don't necessarily seek services until later in life. And that's important for us to know because people are already part of the community in a far different way than our founders could have ever imagined, right? And because, somebody said something to me, and I wish I could give them credit for who it was, but it stuck with me, that we don't wait for communities to become inclusive and welcome people with disabilities. Our very presence in the community makes the community inclusive. And so if you think of it that way, we are, again, I just go to this mutual benefit, employers who are hiring people, businesses who are being visited by people with disabilities, your neighbor, who lives next door, who's supporting their adult child, the kids in the classroom that are going to school with your kids who maybe are receiving special ed services. It's just something that is far more present in our daily lives. And again, the system sort of 75 years ago was sort of built to kind of segregate and protect people from the world in a way that was very caring and dignified and built on a foundation of love. And we are shifting into a perspective of this full inclusion and meaningful interactions with people who are non-disabled and disabled in the community, and how that can benefit everyone, but particularly the people with disabilities. Our clients are living longer and longer, partially because of advances in medicine, right? But I think more than that, people with IDD are living longer because we have invested in these social determinants of health, good nutrition, stable and safe housing, community life, robust and fulfilling community life, work, volunteering in the community. All of this is what's contributing to longer life. So I'll tell a personal story real quick. I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I have a daughter as well, my son's twin sister. And she, was also 11. She is learning every day and teaching me every day what it means to move through the world, worrying about, she has this burden, right, of worrying about protecting her brother, caring for him. But in addition to that burden, she has the privilege and the responsibility of caring for him and protecting him. And she knows more about what it means to be truly equitable and inclusive and kind than a lot of adults I know. And so I look at her and I see how she benefits, right? It's not just about how he benefits from the service of someone caring for him or helping him, but how she benefits and how she's going to take that perspective into the world and make it a better place because of this experience of having a brother who is disabled. So take that and scale it up, because that's what we at Shore Community Services are trying to do for a whole community.
I mean, that's a great example of how a lived experience, right, is multiplicative in how it impacts the community, right? We've got generations, and I want to talk about this for a second, of siblings, brothers and sisters, right, who have the lived experience in caring for and the responsibility for advocating for their loved one. And it's like that sense of true empathy, understanding, and connection to a lived experience is what is going to change our community slowly but surely. And that's a great perspective that Erin, I haven't really heard a lot of people bring to the conversation, but you're 1,000% right. It's interesting how an 11-year-old can be more rooted in lived experience and empathy for what it means to see people for who they truly are, and then help their community see that as well. That's just a beautiful story. And you should be incredibly proud for being an amazing mom who helps your daughter and your son navigate through this ever-changing landscape of life. And I know you're doing an amazing job.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's talk a couple seconds about what the future is going to look like. Okay. So you've been CEO now of Shore Community Services for over a year. Huge congratulations.
Thank you.
What are the future years going to look like, and what is the impact that Erin's trying to have on the legacy of the organization?
Yeah, so I think that we do have this rich history in the community, and there's a lot of change on the horizon. And so first and foremost, I think it's my privilege to help us navigate that change and kind of figure out who is Shore, who has Shore been, and who are we now, and who do we want to be. There's a lot of different directions we could go. I think that we need to prioritize, what are we really good at? We have a lot of peers in this space as well that are doing amazing work. And so because we have this openness to collaboration in a new way, and individuals who are served and their families have a lot more choice in where they get services, right? It kind of forces us to be more collaborative and be more open to partnerships. And maybe we don't have to be the one-stop shop solution for somebody for everything. Maybe we can hone in on what we're really good at, do more of that, scale it up, scale other things down, be real strategic about where we are in this space and how we collaborate with others to serve the community. And so I think that's kind of where our conversations will go in the next couple of years, is just really reviewing the portfolio of services that we provide, where the need is. We know as well that something like 72% of people with IDD are living at home with their families. And about 25% of those caregivers are over the age of 60. So there's a big cliff coming of people who will need services when their caregivers are unable to care for them any longer. And so are we building towards that? We also have, what, as you mentioned, a lot more children being diagnosed, a lot more awareness about neurodiversity and brain health, developmental brain health, that helps us intervene much earlier and follow children as they grow for many, many years. And so that is exciting too, because there's another sort of wave of folks who will need services. The service system, I think, of the wave of people who are coming will look very different than the service system of the folks who are aging in the current system. And so we get to be the architects of what that new system looks like, in partnership, of course, with the families and the people who are receiving the services. And so it's an incredibly exciting time. And SHORE is ready for that challenge. We have 75 years of experience. We have a wonderful reputation in our community. We have a lot of excellent partners in our community. And so it's just, we're just going to have to get out there and hit the pavement and start knocking on doors to say, I know you know who we are, and I know you know what we do, but have you really gotten to know SHORE in its current state and where we're headed, and thought about how you can come alongside us to do this work? And so being much more proactive and sort of engaging with the community in a new way, I think, will be a big part of that.
I get so excited, Erin, because I think about the unique gift that we have as leaders in organizations that have such legacy, right? 74, 75 plus years of time of you guys of being around. But now we have a leader who has a mindset for being able to change the way that the organization presents itself to the community. Talking about what services are we truly great at that we can lean into, so we can actually create a distributive network and a supportive network of other organizations who can fill some of the gaps around us. That in itself is a demonstration of a mindset of abundance and not scarcity.
Yes.
How do you kind of lean into that mindset of abundance and not scarcity, which is so prone in the landscape of nonprofits, like we talked about a little earlier?
It is. It's very easy to fall into that trap as well. But I think that's where having some experience in kind of a grassroots organization where people are wearing multiple hats and sort of scrapping, their way to learning the ropes, if you will, and as they go, relying a lot on volunteer support and community connections and things like that. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned there, because some of the most, powerful organizations are those kind of scrappy grassroots organizations, and we have a lot to learn from them. And they're investing deeply in relationships, which are free, by the way, don't cost a thing. And so I think that kind of deep relationship work is what will bring the resources, but also uncover resources that we already have, that we can distribute differently, that we can use differently. And so it's just kind of being expansive about thinking about what the resource is and can be.
Well, Erin, I'm incredibly excited for what the future is going to look like for you. We have a tradition here on the podcast where our previous guest wants to ask you a blind question.
Oh, no. Okay.
So this is going to be an opportunity for us to be a little bit, I would say, reflective in our current state of who we are today.
Okay.
So the question is framed this way. Imagine that we jump into the future where you have an opportunity as your 85-year-old self to meet the leader who sits in this chair today. if you had 5 minutes of advice that maybe the future version of you could hammer home, that you need to lean into here today, but maybe you're a little resistant to, what advice would your 85-year-old self give you today as the leader who you are sitting across from me in this podcast?
Wow, that's a great question. First of all, I hope my 85-year-old self has been retired for a good long time. And I hope that she has taken the opportunity to enjoy that retirement. And so that, I guess that's part of it, right? That's part of the advice, is that the work will not be finished. You are going to plant seeds now of a garden that you may not see, and be comfortable with that. You know, my goal is never to be the one to accomplish the thing. My goal is to build something that can get the thing accomplished with or without me, right? And so I hope that my 85-year-old self has, is hammering home that advice to not take something so seriously, and to focus on the scaffolding that we're building for the next leader, and the next one after that, and the next one after that, so that I can retire and enjoy my retirement.
Well, Erin, it's easy to understand why you are on the podcast here today. You are the definition of heart and hustle.
Thank
and
you.
Your mindset for how you're going to navigate the future, help your organization be adaptable towards meeting the needs of the ever-growing challenges of the community is truly inspiring. So for everybody tuning in, watching, and listening, can't thank you enough for being on the show. That's the podcast.
Thanks so much. Really appreciated our time together. Thanks again.